Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this very special session that we're running as part of the Clia Cruise Forum. And I'm delighted to be joined today by three gentlemen who are leading the way as we get back to some resumption of cruise. So we've got Darr from MSC Cruises, Peter Darr from Fred Olsen Cruise Line, and David Dingle from Carnival UK. So thank you for joining us, gentlemen. Time is tight, so I'm going to press on. David, I want to come to you first of all. For people who perhaps aren't aware, there was a very important document released a couple of weeks ago. This is a framework for the resumption of cruise. And I wonder if you could just outline what that was and why it's so important for the industry.
Okay, Lucy, the document outlines a framework for how cruise lines operating from the UK or carrying UK passengers should manage their operations in order, firstly, to do all they can to prevent a COVID case getting on board the ship. And should there be a case on board the ship, how that is dealt with, typically getting the person off the ship and making sure that all the other guests and crew members are accordingly protected and kept safe. That document has been worked up in conjunction with particularly the Department for Transport, but also Public Health England and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. It has been endorsed now by the Department for Transport, and that is the prime document for the next step in the process, which is to persuade the Foreign Office to lift the travel advisory against taking a cruise. So it's absolutely critical to the way forward.
All right, absolutely. And you say there it's designed to persuade the FCO to lift the advice. 2 to 3 weeks on now, are we any closer to getting them to lift that advice? You know, have they moved on at all?
Well, of course, it hasn't been helped by the rising scale of the second wave in the UK, and that's common to almost the whole of Europe. So, you know, it's not the greatest time for them to feel that they can instantly lift that travel advisory. So we're having to apply a certain amount of political persuasion to get to the stage where either that is straight away lifted or that we can agree the external conditions necessary for it to be lifted. Intrinsically, we firmly believe that the cruise industry can manage COVID. So it's purely what's happening in the wider world that we need to reconcile such that the Foreign Office lifts it. But we're bringing all the appropriate pressure that we can, working very, very hard amongst politicians, within Parliament, within government, to persuade the Foreign Office that now is the time to get moving and to get this advisory lifted.
Okay, all right, thank you, David. Let's bring the others in, but I'll come to you first because when we spoke, when this framework was first launched, we talked a little bit about what you've been doing in the Mediterranean. You've obviously started, I think at that point you'd restarted with one ship. Since then, I think you've got a second ship sailing, and I just wondered how this framework impacts on your operations and if anything has changed really in the last couple of weeks since the framework was released.
Well, thank you, Lucy. And yes, it is true. MSC Grandiosa is now into her 11th week of sailing on 7-day itineraries out of Malta and out of Italy and calling on Malta. And then we also last week restarted MSC Magnifica as well, also operating out of Italy, calling on Malta and calling on Greece. So we have expanded the restart a bit, but it's still very gradual, modest, and taking it one step at a time here. Another thing that has changed, as David pointed out, is prevalence of COVID has increased substantially, and in Europe in particular. And so that's caused us, through our constant reconsideration, evolution of our protocols, to change some of the things that we're doing to be a little bit more restrictive and protective than we were before. So for example, we've increased the frequency of testing for both guests and crew members on board during the current situation. And we've also changed some of the procedures regarding shore excursions and our shipboard staff, how they interact with those. And so how does that work together with the framework document? As we develop those together as an industry, working through the UK Chamber of Shipping together with Clia, we're taking into account from our perspective the experience we'd already gained. And so we found that those framework documents are consistent with what we're doing, but some of the detail that remains to be filled in by individual cruise lines, we had pretty much already done that because we knew we were going to restart in the Mediterranean as we were developing these UK framework documents as well. And I have to say it's fit together fairly well. There's some differences, but relatively minor. And in most cases, we're just adding on detail and additional things we're doing.
Okay, so just to explain, Peter, I will come to you in a second, but just to explain, when you say that you're increasing the frequency of testing, so presumably before it was prior to embarkation, and then it was during the cruise, if it was a 7-night sailing, how many times are you testing now then?
So the requirement for our protocol was pre-embarkation. And now what we are doing is we are also adding in a test at the midpoint in the 7-day itinerary.
Okay.
And also in the middle of the longer itineraries that Magnifica is on as well. And then with crew, we have increased the frequency that we're testing crew members as well on a recurring basis.
Okay.
They still get the 3 tests, including an isolation period before they start working. But now the recurrent testing that happens after that is happening more often.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's bring Pete in. Fred Olsen, obviously it's largely an ex-UK cruise line. And I know you've been, I'm sure, working through this framework document yourselves. And as Bud said there, it's up to each cruise line to put the detail in and to interpret it and put in your own protocol. So where are you with your planning? I think we're expecting you to restart again back in the water in February with Balmoral, but tell us how you're interpreting that document.
Yeah, I think the framework is really helpful. I think it's been well constructed by the industry in total to provide a very clear outline of the direction we should all take, and then it's about actually building the detail out from there. So some of the work my teams have been doing in the background is to look at the steps along that route from the time when bookings are taken from there right through to where before people travel to the port, about what step we should put in place there to explain to people what we expect from them. The next step would be pre-embarkation when they arrive at the port, what type of testing we'll put in place there. The time when they actually step on board, and we'll have another iteration, as we see, of testing during board. And as Bud just said, they're using the rule of 7 days. They're doing iteration of testing there. It's something we're looking at ourselves in a similar way from that. Whilst at the same time, for crew, any crew who join the ship, there'd be a period to be pretty confident that any crew joining the ship have been fully tested and are COVID-free before any passengers board that vessel. So essentially what we're trying to do is, by anyone boarding that vessel, we make it as safe as possible and build, as I see it, one big bubble over the ship from that perspective. Of course, when you visit destinations, you breach that bubble from there. But then when we go to those destinations, we will only visit destinations which we believe are in the, let's call it the safe corridor from there, or the green zone, whatever you like to call it from there. And in fact, we may look within countries and in individual destinations, say, we wouldn't go to that one because they have a high COVID risk there, but we would go to one which is same country, but a different place where it's very low from there. That's all being worked out in the background at the moment, but I think the framework's a good starting point, but which we then have steps within inside that to decide along the whole of the guest journey how we'd operate.
Okay, and David, when we spoke before, of course, you said that the restart may not even be cruise lines going to other destinations at all. You said that the initial restart could well just be cruise lines, I guess, going around the Channel or the South, round Britain, or perhaps just to one destination and back. So is that still the thinking?
Yes, that's correct. The next stage of the process actually has been some work which we've done with the Department for Transport to show a staged restart process, and the first of those would be cruises essentially confined to UK waters. And Pete talks about the cruise bubble, so we begin by having a British cruise bubble within purely British waters, and really the purpose of that would be to test the concept, absolutely to make sure that in a UK environment specifically, our framework and each individual company's enactment of that framework is working as it should do, and then we move out with bilateral arrangements with ports, most likely to begin with in Western Europe, and then multilateral arrangements to be in cruising beyond the UK. And already, for instance, Canary Islands, great example of a destination where they have already declared that they are ready to accept cruise ships. We now have a UK travel corridor there as well. So something like that would be the next stage. And of course, having that option to do purely UK cruises to begin with, that's quite a good political tool to encourage that travel advisory to be lifted, and perhaps have that advisory lifted step by step, although our preference is to have the whole thing lifted all at once, because in terms of planning and starting up the operation and all the logistical work we have to do that, we'd really like absolute certainty as soon as we can possibly get it.
And you mentioned there the travel corridor being given to the Canaries, which was hugely well received in the UK, because it's obviously been a very worrying time. I think people were worried there would be no sort of winter market, and obviously that gives a little bit of a lifeline back for the winter. And does that give you confidence, David, that the government really are now listening to the plight of the travel industry, and that they might sort of look more favourably towards cruise?
Well, I think there are some signs, but I think that we would want to see more corridors being created as soon as possible. But in fairness, as we've all said, recognizing that we do once again have a rising outbreak in Europe, and in our staged restart, it's quite difficult to say leap from UK waters to waters beyond Europe itself. There are a few options, but not that many. Do I think the government are doing enough? Can they do more? I think there are many ways in which, of course, the government can do more to help the travel industry at the moment, whether it be around testing before leaving the country, be it about testing on re-entering the country so that we can get rid of this highly debilitating quarantine, which is probably, across the whole industry, the worst thing of all. But really specifically to the cruise industry, what you have to remember is that we are, number one, a means of transport. And we're the only means of transport which is covered by a Foreign Office travel advisory. We're being treated as a destination. But if you treat us as a destination, give us a travel corridor. If you're treating us as a means of transport, treat us like any other means of transport. There are some very powerful arguments here. And because of the bubble that a cruise ship provides, and the fact that it is so highly regulated in every possible way, frankly, at the moment, it's the safest form of travel you could have. And we just want to get on and be able to demonstrate that.
I'm sure you do, and we want you to as well. Bud, you mentioned just then about how you'd made some revisions to your shore excursion program, and I'm interested in that because actually you took a hard line, didn't you, right at the start when you first resumed operations? I think some passengers didn't comply to your rules around shore excursions, and you asked them to leave. So what are the new rules or the new protocols that you've put in around shore excursions?
Well, the changes are pretty technical and just procedural about how our crew members interact with the shore excursion. So I think that's invisible to the guests. When it
Okay.
comes to the guests, I don't think anything is going to change from what they really see. It's still the bubble type of a shore excursion. We are still going to take a very hard line, and we've had to do that. And we will continue to do that if the situation comes up again, because we think it's very important. It's also important that the guests be reassured that we're serious about what we're doing, and we won't need them to be serious and meet us halfway for this to work. It's for their safety, the crew member safety, and the safety of the people in the communities where we're operating.
Yeah, very important. And I think actually AIDA did a very similar thing over the weekend. They had a similar situation, and we're also very strict on that. As you say, it provides reassurance, doesn't it? Pete, just talk to me about your customers during this time. Are they worried about coming back? Are they just keen to get back? What do they want to know from you with regards to this document and regards to the sort of safety aspect? Is that high on their agenda, that they know they're going to be safe?
I think what we've seen at the start of when we went into this crisis, I think we saw a huge drop in bookings as there was real uncertainty what this meant. And we did quite a few sort of external surveys to see what the short-term effects would be and what the longer-term effects would be. And we saw the majority of our guests saying to us, we're really unsure what 2020 looks like and whether we want to cruise or not. We're really nervous that this is going to be problematic. But then people would also say that we saw 2021, we saw that we will be going cruising then, hence there's a will to book holidays, book cruises from there, and 2022 even more so. But 2021 they really saw as a year when things should, in their words, return to normal from there. And in the last, I would say, pre the second spike of COVID, we saw extremely strong bookings within our business. More recently, we've seen that that demand for bookings drop a little bit in 2021. It's still there, and there seems to be a mixed view amongst our guests, the consumers, amongst those who are saying, I'm fed up with being at home, I want to go cruise and I want to go on holiday, to the ones who say, I'm really unsure and I'm not willing to book my holiday until I'm 100% sure that life will return back to normal from there. So I think it's ourselves and no other cruise lines have tried to provide flexible approaches to booking arrangements, that if you're not quite sure, there's ways of moving your holiday at different points to make it easier. And that's something which the travel trade should really get their arms around, what our booking conditions are, and say, okay, that will make it easier to get a customer to buy a cruise today for some point in 2021, knowing full well there's a flexible package on the back of that to help out going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we spoke before, David, when this framework was first released, I think we said that, or you guys who were on, you said this was absolutely now an indicator to travel agents that they should sell with confidence. But that was perhaps just as this second wave was coming to the fore. So should agents still be able to sell with confidence, given that on the back of this framework document and what it spells for the industry?
They should be selling with as much and probably more confidence as they would sell any other holiday, for all the reasons that I've just stated. So absolutely yes, and we need that demonstration of confidence as another reason to say to government, you must give us the opportunity to start up again, because confidence matters enormously. And the moment that we can start getting guests once again cruising on our ships, and we can show that you can take a cruise and be safe, and we're ready to demonstrate that. So yes, I mean, travel agents shouldn't hesitate to book a cruise as much as they're booking any other holiday for their customers. No question at all. And
presumably, Bud, because you've been operating, you've been able to communicate back to your trade partners to say, look, we're doing it and it's working and people are being kept safe and they're having a good holiday.
We have, and it is true. The guests have been kept safe, and the guests have given us really good feedback. So I think we have been able to find a balance between providing that experience and providing a health and safety environment.
And have you been challenged at all yet? Because I think we've said, and I think we know that COVID probably will appear on a cruise ship. It's then about how we handle it in terms of, getting those affected passengers off and how you deal with everybody else. So have you been challenged yet? Have you had any outbreaks on your ships, or have you been sort of COVID free on your sailings?
Well, we have had instances of COVID that we've had to deal with under the protocols. And the main thing we took away from it is everything was working the way it was supposed to, and that the authorities had a lot of confidence in working with us as to how we manage that and continue to keep everyone safe. But you have to expect that in this environment, you are going to have some appearance of COVID, and that has happened in a very small number of cases for us.
Okay, but you've managed, as you say, you've now got this full plan in place so that you can manage it really, really well, really efficiently and really safely. All right, well, gentlemen, we have to keep to time today. I could talk to you a lot longer. I'm sorry we have to leave it there, but thank you for your insight. Thank you for your comments. To Bud Darr from MSC Cruises, to Peter Deer from Fred Olsen Cruise Line, and to David Dingle from Carnival UK. Thank you for joining us at the Clia Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lucy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.